when the Federal Communications Decency Act passed, I think it was in 96, this was, there was a lot of controversy around, like AOL was posting, or I was essentially promoting like child pornography rings and stuff like this.
Oh my gosh.
The late Barry Crimmins came in and testified about this stuff. And there was some, there was a Section 230 put into this. We've talked about this in the past, which basically says, and now understand, things have really changed dramatically in terms of the internet from then. One was like a posting board, right? It was basically like a bulletin board, or just a comment section.
Forum.
Or a forum. And the idea was that you can't hold the forum responsible for what commenters write. Commenters have to be responsible for that. These forums can do their best in terms of moderating, but they can't ultimately be held liable because they're just putting up basically a bulletin board. And you want to maintain the sort of like democratic and open quality of the internet. Flash forward 25 years later, 30 years later, and these forums, they still exist. I mean, you could put comments on like, on our YouTube videos. And we have moderators there, but we don't have any liability. We just do it because we want to create a, somewhat, non-hostile space. But it's not our platform. It's YouTube's platform. The thing that has changed is that when people post stuff on YouTube or post stuff on TikTok or post stuff on Instagram, these platforms will serve it up to other people. And it's not completely random. Comments are random, right? I mean, somebody puts a comment in at 12:48 p.m. If you're looking at it at 12:48 p.m., you'll see it. If not, it goes by. You can scroll back up, I guess, but that's it. But on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, they have algorithms that will suppress some content and push others. It's not terribly transparent what these algorithms are. I mean, we use YouTube for a living. We still don't know exactly, like we try and guess what the algorithm is, but we don't really know because they won't tell us. It's proprietary. And there was a case, a Supreme Court case, I think it was over the summer, called NetSuite, I think it was. Hold on, give me 1 second. It was NetChoice. It was Moody versus NetChoice. And this case was when I think Texas and Florida were trying to say that these social media sites could not in any way suppress so-called conservative voices. And by that, they mean COVID denial and racism. And so it goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says that a platform's algorithm reflects editorial judgments about compiling the third-party speech it wants in the way it wants, is the platform's own expressive product, and therefore is protected by the First Amendment. And so Facebook and, well, NetChoice is like the trade association for all these internet companies. So when Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or YouTube have an algorithm that takes third-party content, user content, and the algorithm will, or Twitter for that matter, emphasize what you see, this post by Emma, because she has a blue check, will travel further, or something like that. Or this post from, Sam's YouTube channel will travel further than it would if, Bradley had a YouTube channel, whatever it is, even beyond what the subscribers are.
In practice, what it really looks like is inflammatory content.
Yeah, I mean, what they use is generally inflammatory content or vice versa. Stuff that they know is going to help them sell ads. That becomes their First Amendment expressive product. However, if it becomes an expressive product and is protected by the First Amendment, there are implications for that. And that's what happened in this case in the Third Circuit. Third Circuit is Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And it's a TikTok case. And it's the story of a young girl who's 10 years old and was viewing TikTok. And there were people who on TikTok who were doing a blackout challenge.
Oh.
Which is, remember all the challenges, like when people put buckets of ice? This one was how you pass out.
Oh.
And TikTok, through its algorithm, recommended and posted and basically elevated posts by people who were promoting this blackout challenge. And this 10-year-old girl, Neela Anderson, on her For You page, saw this blackout challenge stuff and attempted what she saw in a blackout challenge, and she accidentally hung herself, or died hanging herself. And so Anderson's family sued under Pennsylvania state law for, product liability, negligence. You didn't do your due diligence here. You're serving up content, encouraging people to do something that could harm them. The first court dismissed the claim because TikTok is simply a platform hosting the speech of others, protected under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
The bulletin board standard, right?
The bulletin board standard.
But not acknowledging that the algorithm prioritizes or puts different things in the, posts on the bulletin board over the other, puts it on bigger font.
Well, that idea of algorithm,
right?
The exercise of an algorithm constitutes protected free expression. I don't think was in existence.
It acknowledges that it's an expression.
No. This case did not. The lower court did not.
Right.
The expression came from the Supreme Court over the summer.
Yeah.
In between these two cases.
Okay.
So the lower court said that, but then the Supreme Court says this is expressive. This is a protected speech under the First Amendment because it's expressive content. The algorithm creates a essentially new form of protected speech. And so this court, the Third Circuit, basically said, well, I mean, if this is protected speech, first party speech under the First Amendment, when they curate compilations of others' content via their expressive algorithms, it follows that doing so amounts to first party speech under Section 230. It is no longer third party speech for which a platform is not liable for. It now becomes first party protected First Amendment speech, but also comes with it a liability. And so TikTok was found liable
In the Third Circuit.
In the Third Circuit.
So they built off what the Supreme Court did by acknowledging that these algorithmic choices are speech, and then assigned a higher standard to it, essentially, of first-party speech, making it...
Not assigned it. That standard exists. The other one was
but connected the dots.
Yes, of course. And so you have a situation now where that concept, the Netchoice, the Supreme Court case, where these platforms were engaging in first-party protected speech because it was a reflection of their algorithmic choices. They're taking user content, putting it through their black box, spitting it out. They basically became publishers instead of a platform. And using, and the way TikTok does this is not just random, right? They do it to make money.
Yeah.
The computer will tell us what's more engaging. We don't need anybody looking at that to verify, hey, is this something exacerbating
They
societal
do
pathology?
it to make money.
Right.
They don't need moderators. They need to see they just need to create a feedback loop. What's going to get the most engagement? What's going to make us the most money?
They need to not have moderators because moderators cost money.
And moderators will say, hey, man, this seems like a bad idea. Somebody could get hurt here. Their entire business model is built upon this lack of liability. Mm-hmm. Like this is what I've been saying for years. The whole algorithm thing is about them not paying people. It is about them maximizing their advertising sales. The fact that they have no liability means that, like, we just go for one function only. What's going to get the most views? We don't care what it is. And if we don't have a human being to go, guys, why are we promoting this? This seems bad. So now this case is going to probably it's definitely going to get appealed if it hasn't already. I don't know. It's been a couple of days. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. I wouldn't put it past the Supreme Court to completely contradict itself from case to case. But this is a big deal because if I'm going to invest, let me put it this way. The whole reason why Elon Musk bought Twitter was so that he could mess with the algorithm. And now if he's liable for the Nazis, for the misinformation, and I'll also say, like, places like Spotify, you can pretend like you're not publishing content because you put it on other platforms, but they're all going to be responsible for this stuff.
Well,
what about phishing schemes and like scams? Are you responsible? I wonder if that's
definitely. Yeah. Facebook is going to be responsible for if they are pushing. There's like some type of military scams on there, like military families if they're pushing this stuff because it's getting the most engagement, this is going to make algorithms very, very blunt. Let's put it that way.
If the Supreme Court doesn't just do TikTok's a CCP agent carve out, I mean, put aside TikTok. This applies to Twitter. This applies it would, in
to
theory.
YouTube. Yes, this would apply to any social media platform that takes third-party content and runs it through an algorithm. They will have liability. Now, Netflix does this, but it's pretty hard to make an argument that you're going to get liable for somebody watched the movie and got a bad idea.
Yeah.
But for stuff like this, for scams, for hate speech, for COVID misinformation, for medical misinformation, all of this stuff is you're going to have plaintiffs' attorneys out there. This is where it's going to come from. This is not going to be this is not like a criminal, although maybe there might, criminal code is a separate thing. But the primary implications of this is going to be, I'm representing these clients who were harmed because your platform served this up to them.
if the rule is by the Supreme Court ruled in a way that makes sense, right? They could say, they could talk about, they could frame
Supreme Court
their
can do whatever they
ruling,
want.
right? But in a national security sense, because that would be, there's bipartisan consensus right now in Washington about TikTok, but attacking it from like basically a Chinese competitive standpoint as opposed to going after big tech more broadly. It's not a coincidence. We were chatting about this before the show, but Mark Zuckerberg just said, you know, Jim Jordan, you were right. Like, I'm your new buddy, on the same day that this was handed down, I think, right? They're going to try to cozy up to Republicans in that ecosystem so that it's more about their competitor TikTok as opposed to a broad-based regulation.
I don't think
law.
the liability, I mean, I think the question is they're going to have to address Section 230. They're going to have to address it head on.
I think that's what
they're going
Mark
to have to.
Have you seen Mark Zuckerberg's recent PR gambit? He's like saying Trump is being so bad, but I think that's because he's worried about like how this is going to happen.
But that's why we shouldn't rule out that they tailor any ruling in a way that's more about like a foreign-owned company as opposed to dealing with Section 230 on its face.
Supreme Court could do whatever it wants, right? But the bottom line is they're going to have to address this head on, because they could do I mean, I don't know what kind of carve out they would do for some girl in Pennsylvania who got served up. It doesn't matter who owns it. The concept that the Third Circuit ruled on had nothing to do with who it was. It's just about liability. Now, TikTok could escape liability, but the Third Circuit has ruled this. So if you're in Delaware, and I would have bet a lot of these social media platforms are incorporated in Delaware because that's where you get all the breaks.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this TikTok suit took place there. If you're incorporated in Delaware or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, I mean, or if the harm was done there and you as a plaintiff are able to get into that jurisdiction, I have no doubt there's already now been half a dozen cases filed.
There's going to be people waiting to sue about
100%. 100%. They're locked and loaded, these plaintiffs' attorneys. And so this is going to, the Supreme Court's going to have to deal with this.
Even if it's not this case, right? Even if, because there's going to be more suits, to your point. Like,
it could be.
My point is just that
this one will get there first, though. Because
this will get there first, but it's specific to TikTok, and I just want it to, or I guess the case is related to that. I just want it to be on people's radar because there's a lot of like tackling TikTok through specifically as one company and ignoring the rest of these American-made companies that have robust lobbying efforts that want to crack down on TikTok as a competitor to Facebook, for example.
The problem in that scenario is, in the Third Circuit, this is the law of the land. So the Supreme Court has to do something affirmative that's going to change the law of the land. They can make a carve out for TikTok it being not liable,
ruling, right?
But they can't go. They have to reverse the Third Circuit, and they're going to have to do that. And how they're going to do that is not necessarily going to be distinct to TikTok, because that law of the land in the Third Circuit exists now.
But they could reverse it and then essentially say, unless there's some sort of national security concern, this is not a way that you can regulate speech. And that's a way to still go after TikTok, but allow big tech companies that are American-owned to not have to abide by
You mean let the ruling stand, but
reverse the ruling, right, in the Third Circuit, and basically say that, no, this algorithmic editorial decisions are not what that first person speech classification, reverse the Third Circuit, but
that's their ruling.
Right.
The Supreme Court made that ruling that it is first person protected speech in Netchoice. And the Third Circuit used that ruling and just basically said, well, if that's the case, then they're liable.
Okay, so the Supreme Court did say first person
that's
in their ruling.
That's the Supreme.
I thought that was an addition.
And the Third Circuit's like, we're going to see how that works out.
100%.
I thought that they were adding to the stringency in the Third Circuit. Okay, that makes more sense then. But yeah, that does put them in the bind at the very least.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. And they're going to have to do that case, or you're just going to see Third Circuit is just going to keep going. People are going to get very busy there.
Good.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.